I've got so many screens going on here. Hello and welcome. It's wonderful to see you all. This is the first live and I'll be doing them monthly. So hello and welcome to Customer-Centric Growth, the CEO Guide to Driving Revenue in 2025. I am Janice B. Gordon, the Customer Growth Expert, founder of Scale Your Sales Framework and host of Scale Your Sales, which way is it, podcast. Today, in this fast-paced B2B landscape, focusing on customer outcomes isn't just about the competitive advantage. It's actually about the necessity. And we're going to be talking about the detail, all of that. And the real question is really, are you walking the talk? Is your organization, is your leaders from a customer-centric point of view? So I'd love to bring on my guest. Here we go. Let me change the screen here. Fantastic. Yes, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce someone who embodies walking the talk and embodies customer-centric growth. Randy Sue Deckard, SVP of Growth at Blesma. We both share the award of the 2024 Sales Intel Top 100 and also 300 women making an impact in B2B sales. And we also met at Pavilion a couple of years ago, and I've been following Randy Sue since then, and literally there certainly isn't a week that goes by that we don't comment on each other's posts, but it's probably several times in the week. So I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the first live of 2025.
Thank you so much, Janice. It's good to be connected again from across the pond.
Yes, let's not forget that. The beauty of these lives is actually having different perspectives. We're in a global world, and with me being in London and you in the US, it's really interesting, some of the conversations and differences. So let me just start here by talking about my introduction into this whole subject, just to kind of set the contents and bed us all in. And it was way back, Randy Sue, I know I don't look old enough, 1990s when I started in sales. And it was very much about hitting the numbers, and understanding customers was very much secondary to that. After my executive MBA, I recognized the limitations of traditional sales when I went into customer experience, working for a consultancy. And I just thought, oh my God, customers are your best innovators and creators. We're really missing something as salespeople. And I realized that the sales metrics, they shouldn't be ignored, but they're not necessarily the most important element. It should be the customer's perspective. And so from the 2010, I started to develop Scale Your Sales Framework, and it's evolved to combine a data-led insights into customer-centric sales and customer-centric strategies to drive sustainable growth and build productive sales teams. So you can see I've been with this for about 30 years now, kind of evolving from those initial insights of customer experience and the impact on sales. So I'm really keen on your perspective. What was your kind of like introduction into this whole area? Because you seem to be talking about this. I remember it from our very first meeting.
Yeah, so I have a non-traditional background. Like, I didn't start out in sales. And so I think that the key thing for everyone to know is I came with a different perspective from the very beginning. And I have a clinical science background. And so I've always been data driven and curious what drives the ecosystem of whatever is happening, whether it's an experiment or the go-to market, ecosystem. And my first commercial role, I actually had more of a CX component to it. And that is what actually set me up for success for being a revenue and growth leader, is because I was able to connect the dots in my first role of not only the external customer but the internal customer, and how, if what's in your organization is not aligned, how that impacts the external customer, and ultimately profitable, sustainable growth for your organization.
That is a fantastic foundation, and it's, such a shame that more people don't come through the customer route, and or having that perspective, because traditional sales is very much about the from the inside out. Traditional sales all about push. I saw this research, and I thought this was quite interesting. In the whitespacestrategy.com, did some research, B2B growth strategy in 2025, and it states that 60% of business leaders identify growth as their primary focus. Yeah, well, that's kind of what you expect, and I would say only 60%. And while 64% prioritize organizational restructuring to build resilience. So I thought about this, and Randy Sue, I'd like your perspective on whether you see customer-centric growth as a strategy for building resilience in the team and in the organization.
100%. And if I can just take everyone back to that dreaded C word, COVID. What happened if you were in business, right? And maybe weren't like a company like Zoom. You had to rely on your customer base because it was harder to get a net new customer. So if you didn't already have a motion in place to retain and expand or get referrals from your existing customer base, like, you struggled. And this is where having like that closed loop feedback and emotion at the end, and also making sure that you are meeting your customers' expectations, so your brand delivers on your promise, which also ties into sales, how they talked to the customer and set those expectations. If you don't have that all built in, you're going to lack resilience, because through tough times, you can still not just survive but thrive as a business if you focus on your customers and making sure that they have recurring impact and are talking about it, because they can help you build an amazing referral loop.
That's really interesting. So how do you make sure that you've got to have so much aligned within your organization to actually make sure that the customer interface is seamless and frictionless, and you have all of those closed loops? So how do you go about making sure that you have all of that alignment and collaboration in place?
So it always starts with leadership, right? So it stops with leadership. It starts and stops with leadership because it has to come from the top down. If the CEO and the executive suite are not talking about this and making sure they're not just talking, but they actually have set, organizational KPIs that are pushed down, it is not going to work. And so the CEO and the executive leadership have to be bought in on what customer-centric means in their mission for the organization and how they're going to live up to that mission. And one of the easiest ways that I've found, whether I'm advising or I'm in an organization, is sitting down with leadership and pulling out a customer journey map and asking people, where do you think we are in the maturity of our customer journey map? And when I say maturity, it's like, have we removed friction? What are pain points? Do we have the right feedback loops? And I think it's interesting, the dichotomy between reality and perception. So this is a fabulous exercise. And honestly, in most companies, this is something that I do within my first 30, 60, 90 days with leadership, to get buy-in if it isn't something that's already in place. And what I find very interesting is is that typically I have some change management to do with leadership to make sure that they're aligned before we can roll it out to the organization.
And it's interesting when you look at what's really happening to what's the perception of what's happening, but surely that also needs to be tied back so there's a clear understanding the impact and ROI.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
that's
that's
what
why,
they're measured by, isn't it?
right. And this is where data and, being a clinical scientist, being data driven, and I always ask for raw data first because, you know, once again, being a data scientist, a clinical scientist, I can create the story. You give me data, I can create any story. So I want the raw data. I don't want just like a dashboard. Give me the raw data, because I want to make sure what I'm looking at, I understand. And, using that data to tell the story, I think is very powerful. I've been at companies and advised companies where, I've been able to demonstrate that, by implementing a really strong customer loop where you are looking at the customer experience to escalate and make sure adoption happens quicker so that time to value or customer realization value happens quicker. How they talk, not only those customers talk internally about, and it increases adoption, which can not only help with retention, but also, expansion, but then also getting customers so excited that they refer. And I've had companies go from 0% referrals to 30% referrals in a year. And that sales cycles faster. Those customers have a larger ACV, and it cost a heck of a lot less to acquire them. And honestly, it was just a refining what was already in place. And that is really, once again, my clinical science background, and that science background about experimenting and refining and iterating is one of the ways that I've been able to drive revenue profitably and efficiently, and see really strong growth very quickly in organizations.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. There's so many organizations that, I work with, and when I ask about their referral strategy, it isn't formalized. It's kind of ad hoc. And so, well, you're going to get an ad hoc results. So, I think your message of really follow the data and iterate, that's where you really get results. But it's also about having that kind of clear strategy of what are the levers you need to pull. When you pull them all and they're all aligned, it's going to ensure that your organization is moving to, because it's never a finite point, because the customer's always evolving, but it's moving closer to the customer and towards a customer-centric ecosystem. So what else would you say in terms of leadership? Because you said it starts and ends with them. Leadership, where there may be some challenges or barriers, so that's why the implementation of the strategy falters.
Yeah, so it's really important, like I said, that leadership is all on board and agrees that customer-centric, what it actually means. And the way that I like to define it in an organization is that being customer-centric means that we are focused on not just revenue, but customer outcomes. And the reason why that distinction is important is that um, everyone, if who's on, I'm sure could raise their hand, who's had what I call not the right customer that has actually cost the company, right? Whether they use exorbitant amount of help desk or development time because they just weren't the right fit, right? But sales got them through. So once again, having your brand promise live up to a customer means that you're going to attract the right customer. That means that they're going to go quicker. You're going to use less resources, and you will grow revenue quicker because of what I mentioned earlier. But it's getting everyone on board that it's not just the actual revenue number, but customer outcomes, because customer outcomes will drive profitable and more efficient growth. You're going to see a decrease in the cost to acquire. You're going to see an increase in retention, a decrease in churn, an increase in expansion. So, yes, you will have growth, but it may be that you're more profitable and not that it's from a net new logo customer. And when you're looking at it that way, like I said, you can really has sustained and also have that resilience that we talked about earlier. Because let's face it, in business, you never know. Like, knock on wood, we don't want another COVID, but like right now, AI is disrupting. So how are we being more efficient? Like, that's one of the ways that AI is just disrupting us right now. We have to be more efficient.
And we have to build closer relationships with the customer. We have to be
Yes.
more human, but AI enables that, and we're able to better match the expectations of customers. There was one poll, and I'm sure you saw I did at the beginning of the month, because it's the theme of customer centricity this month in our content. And the poll asked if leaders had a role to, are the key influences in terms of customer centricity. What is the role that they play, and is it a priority for leaders? And interesting enough, 89% of those that responded said yes, it is a priority. But Alice Hyman, there was a back and forth in the comments, and she said, well, if most of us agree that it is a priority, why is it that she's not seeing this on the ground? And it's organizations say, yes, customers are a priority, but it's the implementation of all of the strategy and the iteration that you talked about that enables that to happen. So we're not always seeing this on the ground.
I 100% agree. And one of the questions that I always ask, like I said, in my first 30, 60, 90, or if I'm advising the leadership, is, who here has talked to a customer this week? And honestly, usually I get no hands or maybe one hand. And this is something that is a problem. Leadership needs to be connected to customers, whether that's through a customer advisory board or actually interacting with a customer on a regular basis. As a leader, I interact with customers, on a weekly basis, because there's something about actually hearing it directly from a customer and also bringing those stories back to share. It makes such a difference when we have a meeting and we share, when I spoke with X, they said this. It is just so much more meaningful. And I think as a leader, I am more invested because I feel like I understand our customers better and what drives them, because I actually talk to them.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a question similar to that I often ask the leaders of my company, and what is the impact of that decision on your key customers?
Yeah.
Your most valued customers.
Yeah.
What is the measurable impact? And it's that uncomfortable shifting in your seat. It's like,
yeah. Well, and if they can't answer that, it's because they don't actually understand how they're, like you said, how their customers would be impacted. And so as a leader, how can you make these decisions if you don't understand how your customer actually uses your product or the value that your customer gets? So it's not about our features or whatever. Like, I cannot tell you how many times we've had, conversations with customers and realized how they're using it is not how we actually thought they were using it, and what's valuable to them. Like, why are we building this, right? So that is why it is so critical for leadership to understand that, and also have those closed loop feedbacks, because that's going to drive what product does. No one wants, oh, we dropped a feature and yeah, okay, check for the sprint, but customers could care less. What's the point, right? It's not impacting the business.
Absolutely. And I smile because this is my whole kind of starting point when I went into customer experience and realized that we set customer journeys for them, looking at new product development or testing of products. And you had, the marketers, the designers, the tech people all sitting there with the customers, and they couldn't talk, and the customers would always find the shortcut. They would always find the route that hadn't been designed in. They would always find the quickest, smartest way. And and even the technical people were completely astounded how customers that were non-technical beat them at their own game. And so it's critical, absolutely critical, not to have the inside out thinking, but very much outside in. And in order for that to happen, you have to be sitting at the table with the customer all the time, and be aware of what's changing in their business. And you're simply moving and flowing with where your key customers are moving and flowing. You've got to be in sync, haven't you?
100%. And it is, like I said, it's also critical that not just leaders understand this, but employees are aligned as well. And that's why, like I said, it has to start at the top, that this is a priority in how we operate. Otherwise, like I said, you'll have product going off, developing features that they think are where we should go next, and that's not actually how customers are using the product or what would be actually meaningful to them.
Yeah. So 76% of B2B customers expect consistent interaction across all the departments, requiring a seamless interaction. So in terms of cross-functional alignment, what do you say needs to be in place for that to happen?
So I always talk about the foundations, and I always say it is important to be consistent before you wow. So in customer experience, we have it's called MOT, moment of truth. That's something that's really important to a customer. And so wherever things that are super important to the customer, those interaction points are, you have to be consistent. So that means that a customer experiences your brand the same way over and over. And the best scenario I can give that is, not business, is like, if you have a favorite restaurant, and you go and you order your favorite meal, you are expecting a certain taste. And if you've ever gone and for some reason it's not the same, how disappointed you are, right? It leaves this blah in your mouth. Well, think about that from the customer perspective in business, is that if you are if you are consistent, so that means and think about all across the journey, how your sellers set expectations dictates how a customer perceives their onboarding and implementation, and how a customer is actually onboarded and implemented, plus what the sales team does impacts their time to adoption and value. And like I said, it just keeps rippling down. And so everyone has to not only share their experiences, but be continually iterating for a consistent result. And that means that you have to have this cross-functional collaboration, but everyone needs to understand how they're impacting the customer. And that's where having, like I said, these conversations at leadership and then your frontline leaders. And so it trickles down. So everyone understands how they're actually impacting the customer, what they do on a day-to-day basis, and what the customer cares about
the most. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Completely agree with that. In terms of cross-functional teams, the planning sessions and alignment of teams around the customer journey that you talked about, from leadership going down, and also establishing the customer-driven goals, and being really transparent about the metrics. So, let's talk about some of the metrics that you might use, because you've got the traditional, which is, we're looking for the customer lifetime value, but also you've got the value realization by the customer as well. So talk to me more about that.
Yeah. So what you want to do when you're focused on customer outcomes is, when is the customer articulating value? The quicker that you can do that, means that you've increased adoption and increased the likelihood of retention, right? So those are predictive. And this is where customer success and how you're gathering insights is super, super crucial. I want the customer articulating, saying, I found this valuable, right? Like, so literally having keywords and pulling out of recorded transcripts, the customer's own words saying, I've found value, and I'm like, looking to the next thing, like to a higher adoption. Those are the things that we look for, and we actually have time. Like, what is the average time for a customer to receive value? In my current company, that's 30 days. That's kind of our brand promise, that within 30 days, you will have received this value. And we're looking for that within 30 days. Your company may be different. And if we are ahead, great. If we're behind, why? Was it an anomaly? What was driving this? And is this something that we should take action on? Not everything that's an outlier or an anomaly means you should take action on it. And that's, once again, having that cross-functional collaboration and understanding, because you don't want to put a huge amount of resources if it truly is an outlier or an anomaly versus, oh, something's drifting in our process and system.
Yeah, love it, love it. All right, well, if we've got any comments coming through, I will also check, because I know a lot of people view the recording, but let me just kind of summarize some of the key points and fantastic takeaways from all of the insights that you have given us, Randy Sue. So you talked about moments that matter, but also focusing on the metrics that matter. And you've just discussed, customer lifetime value and VRC as well. And that's about the kind of like leading and lagging indicators. It's fostering collaboration and conducting and aligning your teams to the customer-centric goals, and assigning customer-centric champions, whether that's your leader, but you also talked about making sure that we have a clear understanding of who is our customer and their perspective, not only from leadership, but as we go through the organizations at different level. And, engaging with strategic customers. I mentioned quite a few times about key customers, your most valued customers. That's the direction that we need to focus on. And whether you have an executive sponsorship program around that, you talked about ensuring, on a weekly basis, as you do, sitting down with the customer and really understanding the feedback loops and making sure they're closed feedback loops and you're acting on them, and scheduling regular touch points with your key accounts and customers to really build that trust and that first-hand feedback that you mentioned. And then also building customer-centric cultures as well. So it's got to be company-wide communication. Everyone's aligned on the same page. So I'd like to leave you with the final word, Randy Sue. What's your kind of final advice and comment that you would like to give our audience?
This is everyone's responsibility. So, obviously it starts, at the top, but everyone makes an impact. And, I think one of the biggest things for me is that I know that I've had success in an organization when I've had people who are not client facing say, oh my gosh, I get it, why what I'm doing is important. And so that's an internal signal to look for in your organization for the people who aren't client facing, when they're able to connect how they're impacting the customer.
Love that. Love that. Excellent. Okay, so do not forget that on the next live is the 18th of March, where I'll be talking about diversity in sales. This is another conversation we've talked about a lot, Randy Sue. A business imperative, political battleground. There's so much that has changed, hasn't there, Randy Sue, and
Yes.
happening, and like looking at the US, UK perspective. So in closing, I would say that the path to sustainable growth in 2025 is really clear. It's the customer-centric path. It's not just about strategy, but the real foundations for resilient businesses. So I'd love to thank you, Randy Sue, for sharing all of your insights. And let's continue to walk the talk. I know you certainly do. This is something that you've led with for for many a year, but I didn't know your background to this, that customer experience was your starting point into sales. So it all makes sense. I think we may have just got a comment that's come in here. I don't know if I can see it. Oh, great insights. Great insights. Thank you very much. Just in the nick of time. That's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much, Randy Sue, for all of your insights.
Thank you.